Our guest today is co-host for CBS This Morning Saturday. She is also an anchor and reporter for CBS Sports and CBS Sports Network, a former ESPN host of First Take and Cold's Pizza, a puppy mommy to Barkley, and most importantly, an amazing wife and stepmom to Jack, my friend Dana Jacobson.
So good to be here with you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you so much. And remember to watch the video version of our podcast and see Dana's smiling face. Please visit neverloseyourcape.com. Dana, I am so grateful for you to be here today. I'm so excited to see you. We start every episode with our warm-up segment because I was a basketball player and we like to have a little bit fun at the beginning. So you're going to get 2 rapid-fire questions from me, one from my producer, Serafina. And so the first one, what are you binge watching right now?
So I just finished both of these, but that's because I know I have no time right this moment. But I just finished what everybody binged. Schitt's Creek. I watched them win all their awards and was like, I guess I should probably watch this. So I binged that over like Christmas vacation and did all of that. And then I had to do Bridgerton. And Bridgerton was, I think I may have done it in a day without any problem and literally sat on the couch and did nothing and loved every second of it and cannot wait for season 2 of that now.
I love it. I love David. It like gives me new perspective on life. I just that was an amazing answer. We talked about this a little bit, but I want our listeners to hear it. And I love your answer so much because I know what you're going to say. Best thing about quarantine 2020.
You do know what I'm going to say. So I got married in the fall of 2019. And my husband and I have jobs in sports. He's the Celtics radio voice. So he's in Boston with my stepson. I'm in New York because my job is based here and I'd go back and forth. And our joke was always, we didn't see each other a lot. We'd see each other on the road. We'd have a couple days here and at different times, more or less, but we were never really together like 5 days a week. So we used to joke that 10 years into the marriage, Jack, his son, my stepson, that, he'll go to college and we'll figure out if we like each other. And, if not, we had a 10-year marriage. It's a pretty good run. Quarantine made that all happen really fast. So we were separated for the first, I think it was about 5 weeks or so. So we didn't see each other because we were stuck in respective cities. And then we started going back and forth, and I spend more time with him in Boston than I ever expected to at this point. And we did find out we like each other, which is good. I love being around him. I love being around my stepson. My dog, I've basically said Barkley no longer gets New York dog credentials. Barkley stays in Boston. He loves it. He has more space there. He's a Boston dog now. I can't even lie about that. So that, truly, all joking aside, has been really a gift for us to get the amount of time together because he still isn't traveling for games. So he does games from Boston. And it's really been amazing to get all the time together that we've had.
I love it. All the Bostonians, we just slowly take the New Yorkers and we pull them in. I love it. No, dogs not spared either. We take all those.
That's right.
Hi, Dana. Well, again, thank you so much for being here today. My question to you is, was it always a goal of yours to be on-air talent?
As soon as I knew that television was what I wanted to do, I'd grown up wanting to be an actress. And I could very quickly, when I got to college, first week of college, go on an audition. And I was watching people and in my head went, yeah, you are not going to make it. You are not good at this. You better figure something else out. And what else do you love? And the one thing I remembered really enjoying was asking questions. Oh, I liked that time I wrote a little bit for the newspaper. I remember when you did this radio thing. And in my head, right away then, and this gives away my age, I'm like, you know what? I want to be Katie Couric or Oprah Winfrey, something like that. And Katie Couric was on the Today Show at the time, and Oprah was Oprah, and that was it. And at that point, it really was on air. It wasn't, I just want to be involved in it. It was, I want to be that person in front of the camera.
That's awesome.
Let's take that. Let's go right with it. Cause let's sort of, you set the scene for us. What's interesting is that I came to ESPN a couple years after you did, although you were ESPN New York for Cold Pizza. And then they made this big, that was like world-ending announcement that they're moving Cold Pizza out of Manhattan into Bristol, Connecticut. and they're going to change the name. I came into ESPN as a 24-year-old into this group called the talent producer department, where there was a whopping 4 of us. And I worked the graveyard shift for First Take. I worked like 2 p.m. to like midnight, watching all the games play out and all that sort of stuff. So how did you feel like in your career you went from, I don't want to be an actress, to like, now I'm hosting my own show with the delightful Jay Crawford, as you know?
Well, I mean, it was crazy because I really did start in news, and I started behind the scenes and worked my way in front of the camera. And I was 100 pounds overweight at the time. It was not what you would see on TV, but I don't know what it was. I didn't care. I wanted to be a reporter and an anchor. And I had a news director in Traverse City, Michigan, which was my first on-air job, who switched me into sports just because I knew sports. And I realized that I really enjoyed doing it. Got a job in Sacramento, which was a much bigger market, was there for 6 years, got to ESPN and was doing sports. And sort of, you know, at the time when I got to ESPN, I was doing Sports Center. The cold pizza didn't exist yet. And when it was created, it was different than obviously what people sort of learned what it became, I should say. But there was something about it when I got moved to that show in 2005. It was, now we have 20 million morning shows in sports. There weren't sports morning shows. Sports Center was running on what we called the reel. It was from the night before when everything was finalized. They taped their last version of it and it would just keep rerunning. So this was something really new. And in my head, all of a sudden, I'm like, wait, this is like the Today Show or the Good Morning America or the CBS This Morning of sports. And so to me, this was as close to what I had always dreamed of as the dream job that I could get. And obviously some of that changed when I got into sports. There were different things I wanted to do, but I loved every second of it. And, you know, I started saying I was 100 pounds overweight and I didn't look the way that everybody thought somebody on air should look or expected. And I lost and gained and lost and gained, and did that at ESPN even. And while I was on First Take, finally like got down to a weight where I've sort of stayed around, not because that's what it should be on TV, but I think because I found more happiness within myself and was healthier in different ways. But there certainly was always a pressure to look a certain way. And I was always aware that I didn't look that way, for good or for bad. Nobody was going to hire me, I thought, because, oh, she's the blonde bombshell that you want to see on TV. My thought was, I better be really good at my job so that people want to hire me because I'm really good at my job. And I think that helped me a lot too.
Did you ever, when you said you were on TV, but you were at the weight that you didn't want to be, was there ever a point where you were like, maybe I should just give up? Like, what kept you going? Did you love it so much that that's what drove you?
Yeah, I don't remember wanting to give up because of my weight ever. I remember being in Sacramento my first year, and I was the number 3 in the sports department. And the number 2 was just kind of an ass. And I hated working with him. And I'd have to still go shoot sometimes. And I wasn't supposed to be shooting video, but they'd send me out to shoot things. And I wanted to be on camera. I didn't want to be shooting like I had done in Traverse City, Michigan. And I think then a little bit crossed my mind, not out of getting out of the business, but should I be looking for another job? But you know what, Lisa, I don't know why I didn't think of quitting. Maybe some of it was that was just never my way. I had a family around me that always supported me and on every level, told me I was beautiful and believed I was beautiful. It wasn't like, we're going to say it, but we don't. And that it didn't matter, that wasn't the only thing about me, that I was a complete package. And they built enough confidence in me that even though digs about my weight or comments still to this day hurt, but I had enough confidence to keep going. And I certainly wasn't going to let that derail what I had wanted to do. And maybe some of it too, like I say, nobody looked like that. Oprah Winfrey had a huge weight struggle on air, and that may not have been sports, but it was on air. And so in my mind, it was, I just never thought that would be what would push me out of it.
Oh, it's so powerful. And I think your mind is a big part of it. I'm sure hearing positive reinforcements over and over again helped you continue down the path. But like you said, when you went to be the host of Cold Pizza after doing Sports Center, and there really wasn't that many morning shows, like what was it like being a female sports anchor at that time?
Well, it was so different. That just being, no matter what, whether it was Sports Center or Cold Pizza, any show like that, what was so different at ESPN compared to doing local sports, you had to know everything, and you had to be a generalist in everything. You didn't have to know everything about each team, but you better know enough that you could carry on a conversation. And the difference between something like Cold Pizza, what became First Take, and Sports Center was you were going to be in the middle of the conversation. And it wasn't just doing some highlights, which you could do a highlight and know nothing about a team and get away with it with some notes. To have a conversation, to ask questions, you needed to know more. I think I enjoyed the fact that there weren't a lot of women still doing maybe that role. We obviously have more women at ESPN. I always felt like I held my own when we had our debate portions. I held my own. I thought I was a different voice, and it was a unique voice. And I loved that I could do what I think is so great about morning shows, which was show this range of, look, I can have a serious conversation about a topic. We can talk about steroids in sports. We can talk about a cheating scandal, but I also can then go have fun with you. And I don't know if you remember this, like at some point we had like NASCAR drivers, or we were like the pit crew, and Risha and I were outside changing a tire, and I could do that as well. And I guess to me, it was just like the best of all these worlds coming together. And the fact that I was a woman doing it and there weren't a lot of women doing it, just even better to me.
Oh, I have to say, that was one of the funnest points in my ESPN career, is that show was so fun. What was so cool about that show, and for all our listeners that might not remember that version of First Take, it was different. It was not Sports Center. It wasn't at that time. ESPN News was very big. There was a ton of shows on news. This was a show that myself or someone in my department could book a guest, and we knew they were going to have fun. Like at some point we lost this notion that sports like had to be really serious reporting. And this was the one show where I knew, like, hey, I could bring Gary Player or the college football coaches, and we could do like a putting contest, or like you said, you're changing a tire, and that was super fun. So what would you say was your highest point at ESPN? What do you remember?
Probably doing that. To me, the original Cold Pizza in New York, when I got there, the original cast had been doing the show for about a year. It was Jay with Kit Hoover, Thea Andrews, and I think Leslie Maxim. It wasn't working. They brought Skip and Woody in to add a debate portion, to add more sports to it. Still wasn't working. So they got rid of all the women and brought me on board to join the three men. And it was doing a nothing rating. It was an asterisk in the rating, which meant nothing. We made it successful enough that the reason we came to Bristol, that they wanted the show there, was if they weren't paying for a New York studio, they could make money on the show. And we knew when we went, we were charged with making it a success, with saving this show that had been a great idea, but just needed to be refined. And Mike McQuaid, who was in charge of it, and Pete McConville, and all the people that worked on it, it was a group effort. But I think for me, that was where I was the most proud of the things I was doing, was when that show, probably right before we moved back. I loved that format of the show. I loved what we were able to do. And even just other things that I was doing. I was hosting X Center and going to the X Games, but I felt like at ESPN, that was probably where I felt like I was at my best and having the most fun and really enjoying this career that I probably couldn't even have envisioned when I started out.
So going from your highest point now, can you talk to us about, in that time frame at ESPN and your career at that point, what was your biggest struggle?
My biggest thing was what eventually led to my leaving, I think. I lived in Connecticut for almost that entire time. I had a couple of years in New York, but I was in West Hartford, Connecticut for 10 years and single. And as I used to say, I would see the same 5 guys, it felt like, out. And then everybody else worked at ESPN. And I didn't have a life outside of work. And that really weighed on me at certain points, when I wasn't enjoying the job as much. You know, when you love your job, it's fine if you don't have a personal life. When you're not enjoying the job as much, or it's changed a little bit, it's harder.
And how old are you at this point?
I was mid 30s at this point.
Because I think it's one thing if you're like grinding away in your early
Yep.
20s, but then, like you said, it takes a toll on you after a while.
Yeah. And this wasn't, oh my God, I need to be married tomorrow. But I really felt like it was you know, if there was a movie, this would be the point where the person's like, I gave my whole life to my job, and what did I do? And I didn't want to be that person. And I was trying to have a life. Mm-hmm. I got a studio apartment in New York. I'd owned a house in Connecticut right after I first moved there. And so I had that house. I went and rented a studio apartment in New York thinking, well, I'll go in on weekends and maybe I'll meet some different people. But it's like a 2-hour drive there and back. And so going back and forth was difficult. And then I had my house and my dog. And I realized like my life felt unfulfilled is the wrong word. It just felt like I was missing something and that I should be happier. I had a dream job. Like the job was really good and I worked at ESPN and I loved the people I worked with, but I wasn't happy. And I know we're not happy all the time, but something was certainly missing. And my dad died in the fall of 2012. And when he died, he was always one who told my brother and I, do what you love. He wanted to be an architect. His grandmother made him become a doctor. He wanted to be an architect. And look, being a doctor, it's a great job. But he always would preach to us, and my mom did too, do something that you love and be happy. And I realized like, I'm doing something I love, but I'm not happy. So something's wrong. And when my dad died, I just realized that something had to change and made the decision to leave ESPN because the only thing I could think of was that I always moved where the job was. And maybe I needed to go live where I wanted to live. And either the job would come or maybe I had to figure something else out because what I had been doing certainly wasn't working at that point.
Right. That's really powerful, a really powerful statement that we can have our dream job and we can have everything that we aspired and everything that we achieved our goals, but we're still not happy. And I think that leads to this whole thing of like success doesn't buy happiness.
Right. And there's got to be a balance.
Right. And so then now you leave ESPN and then what happens?
Well, so I leave ESPN, no job, but with prospects. Like there were, and I know when I left, people were like, oh, it's one of those, she's not saying where she's going, but she's signed a deal. And I really didn't have a job. But I will remember this. And I feel like this reflects on ESPN and I don't mean it this way. It was where I was as a person. I was at Disney because I knew I was probably leaving ESPN. So I took my brother and now sister-in-law, who was then his girlfriend who loved Disney, to Disney because we did have a great deal. Yep. And we're sitting at Disney and my agent calls and he tells me it was like the one job I thought I might get that wasn't that it wasn't going to happen, that they were nowhere near salary and they weren't going to raise it and it wasn't going to happen. And if I wanted that, it was crazy. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to stay at ESPN. I don't have a job. And I started crying. And then I realized in talking with a friend, you shouldn't be crying when you're thinking about this is what you're going to be doing with your life. And that no amount of money, shouldn't say that. There probably was a certain amount of money that would have helped in that. But you know what I mean? That's not a good thing. You need more happiness. So I sold my house. I sold my car. I moved into that studio apartment I had rented and I put the rest of my stuff in storage. And my dog at the time, Chewy, I took her to my studio apartment in New York and figured I'm going to give myself a year to live off my savings and hopefully find a job. If I don't, I'm going to have to rethink what I want to do. Either I'm going to have to go back to ESPN and ask for a job. And I did leave on good terms. Again, this wasn't a reflection. They wanted me to stay. I think more than anything, the people I negotiated with, they were convinced I had another job because I was turning down a nice contract offer and saying, no, I don't have a job, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. And I looked for a while, had my agent looked for a while, and I I went to a lower point. Like, I was glad to be living in New York, but suddenly you'd think, I worked at ESPN in the sports industry. This should be like no brainer, easy, get a job. And suddenly it was, well, everybody associates her with ESPN. We're NBC Sports Network. We're already bringing Michelle Beadle on board. We don't want two ESPN people. Or, yeah, we're out in LA. It's the NFL Network. We're launching a new football morning show, but she did a morning show and we want to have our own, and this, they're going to associate her with this brand. So suddenly what should have been this great brand to associate with seemed to be a black mark on my resume instead. And I couldn't get a job that I wanted. I was offered some jobs that would have been like taking 10 steps back with the oh, you'll work your way up quickly. I'd worked my whole career to work my way up. I shouldn't have to start over. And that was a really dark time of trying to figure out what I was going to do, and being in disbelief and being hurt in such a different way that all the work I'd done, which I knew was really good work, didn't matter, that I didn't fit whatever somebody was looking for. And that in, let's say there were 10 jobs out there that I wanted, I just wasn't the one that they were taking. And about 6 months after I left, I ended up taking a job with CBS Sports Radio. They were launching a sports radio network and a morning sports show. And I took it a little bit out of fear because it had been 6 months and I was getting worried. A little bit because I knew that there was some work at CBS Sports Network that I might be able to get into if I was already doing radio. But it wasn't out of, this is the greatest opportunity ahead of me. I did think, look, I've always had a career where I take a chance on things. And sometimes the job that you never saw coming ends up being a great opportunity that you didn't know was there. And in some ways that was, but it did not end up being a dream job, but it gave me a job and a full-time employment and a different platform to work off of. But it was the 6 months in between ESPN and that, as happy as I was, it was almost the pendulum swung the other way. I was so happy personally. I was living in the city. I was meeting people. I had a life again. And it wasn't just about my job, but then I had literally no career. And I had never been in that position.
So when you were in that, I love that, by the way, that visualization of the pendulum swinging the other way, that's so powerful. And so when you're in that dark place, what did you have a moment where you said to yourself, okay, like, this is scary. I'm in this dark place. And then did you think of like, what are some things, did you have a toolkit of where you sort of use some things to slowly pull yourself back out? Because job hunting, exhausting. Yeah. And you have a really specific niche, just like I do. And to get up every day and fight for that can lead to pretty dark places.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I will say I had some very close friends who, just kept saying, you're really good at what you do. The right job is going to come along. You are going to find work. Don't give up. You just haven't been in this situation in a really long time. And that helped. And sometimes it didn't. And sometimes I'm like, you're full of it and who cares? And I'm not blonde and I'm not this and I'm not. And I would find every reason, like, this is why they're not going to hire me and this, and you're wrong. My dad had died, but my mother was incredibly supportive. I used to say, what happens if I go through my savings? And she's like, well, we're not going to let you live on the street. So just know that. And that sounds silly, but I did always know that. And I think that's really important. It didn't mean my mother was going to say, hey, come live at home and don't get a job. But if I went through my savings and then had to find a job, I wasn't going to be living on the street. And I don't know, there was power in that and help in that. I had an agent who was looking for jobs and is the one that found the sports radio job, which, it's odd. The sports radio job, which should have been this great, okay, now I'm working, ended up actually being pretty bad too, and was not what I wanted. And sports radio, I say, is the last bastion of inappropriate male guy, frat house type talk. and it was supported by some people within that. And that made it worse because suddenly I'm like, I was at ESPN doing a morning show and now I'm doing this. Like, that's not what I left to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it forced, and even my agent at that point was like, well, I can't find you. I haven't found anything else. Like, this is where we are. And it was almost like that. So by not believing that I could find something else, it just triggered me in a different way. And I went out looking for things I wouldn't have thought of. And I went over to CBS News and said, hey, I work at CBS Sports a little bit, Sports Network, and I work at CBS Sports Radio, and I'm looking for work. And I love doing stories. If I bring you some stories, can I do some stories? I don't know if I would have done that if I hadn't felt so back against the wall. What am I going to do? Because I don't want to do radio. I don't have enough work over here at sports. How do I do this?
That and getting through that misogyny of the male talk, that's not an easy thing to overcome.
No, and it wasn't, again, not everybody, but it was certainly there, and it was even recognized there. And there's some of that you can have a lot of fun with, that was fun and enjoyable, but not overall. And the job was sold to me differently. It's a morning show, then suddenly I'm the one doing sports updates also. Well, wait, nobody said I was doing sports updates. Like, I don't, sports updates on radio, or you could, like, no, this isn't. So it was a lot of sort of coming to terms with, as much as I didn't want to start over, I started over there. Like, I started over in sports there. I eventually started over in news, but that was without realizing it, leaving ESPN to me was like I had to start my career over. And
it sounds like from your dark place that your toolkit, for our listeners out there, that your toolkit of getting out of this dark place was talking with friends and listening to their confidence in you, learning that the unknown is not a bad thing. Like, not knowing what's happening, that's not bad. Like you said, this was the first time in your career that you didn't have a job, but that's okay. And it's scary just because you don't know it.
Right. My dad used to say to me all the time, like, what's the worst that can happen? And always in the end, no matter what it was, you're going to fail. You're going to fall on your face. You're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to fail at something. And he's like, and then what? You're going to get up like you always have, and you're going to figure something else out. And that seems so basic, and yeah, of course. But I didn't have my dad to remind me of that anymore. And I had to sort of remind myself, look, you built a career once. It wasn't magical then. You had people that you didn't want to work with in Sacramento. You figured that out. You had jobs at times you didn't want to do. You figured that out. And so it was almost reminding myself, like, you've been here and done this. You can do this again. And I feel like whenever I've had those situations of, I don't think I can do this anymore, this isn't making me happy, that well, how do I think outside the box? Where else can I go? What else can I do? How do I add to that? Because it isn't the fear of the unknown. And the worst that'll happen is you'll fall on your face and you'll make a mistake and someone will laugh, and then you'll get up and you'll do something else. And that's a huge relief to think that's the worst. Like, we've all in horrible ways fallen on our face, made fools of ourselves, had horrible headlines and things written about us, and you survive them. And so if that's the worst, you may as well try, because doing what you're doing isn't working. So you better try something else.
Right. I think that toolkit is playing out the what ifs, like your mom said. That's super powerful. Like, if you play out, like your mom said, like, well, you're not going to live on the street. So if you actually sit down and have a conversation either with yourself on paper or with another person and say, what if this happens? What if I can't pay my mortgage? Then what happens? Yep. Okay, so you move and you live somewhere else. What if I am off the job market for so long, people don't remember who I am? Okay, so let's talk about that. So I think playing out the what ifs is a great toolkit material piece to have. And then I absolutely love your last one, which is to advocate for yourself. So you were in a situation, you weren't happy with what you were doing, and you decided, you found it in yourself, okay, I'm going to go over to CBS News and have a conversation. Like, what if I bring you news stories? Like, what were they going to say? No.
Right,
Okay, so if
right.
they
And
said no, okay, they say no. Exactly. I love that. I think that's such a powerful tool to use.
And I think certainly in what I was doing, when you have an agent who's supposed to be advocating for you, you have a tendency sometimes to sit back and look, you're paying them, you want somebody else. You don't want to always be, hey, look at me, look what I can do. But what I have realized over the years, and I've had people represent me who are lovely people, no one advocates for you the way you're going to. And nobody can fully understand your happiness or unhappiness, because to them it's about a paycheck. Like, you're doing a job and it's a paycheck. To me, of course it's a paycheck. We all need to survive and live. But I do this job because I really do love it. And I love what I do. And I love telling stories. And I left a job that paid me well, that I could have stayed at ESPN for a really long time, but I wasn't happy. And so I always ask myself, like, are you happy? Because it's not the paycheck, it's not this. And nobody else is going to ask that and advocate for me other than me. Nobody's going to fully understand that. And I think maybe all of those questions and everything you said in my toolbox that I have, in part, always goes back to, I've always felt supported, certainly by my parents. My husband now is truly my biggest champion. And if I said to him tomorrow, like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, which, by the way, I probably say like every other week now in the pandemic, I'm done, I'm not doing this, that's over. He's like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. And he knows I just need to almost work through it, because then it's me going, no, I'm not gonna, no, I'm fine. I can do this. I'm fine. I can handle this. But always knowing that there's somebody behind me, I think for me at least, has given me the strength that I've needed to make changes to try to get somewhere else or be happier.
And now, you're the co-host of CBS This Morning. I mean, that's unfreaking believable. Like, do you think that your advocating for yourself helped you get there?
Oh, there's no doubt. I look back, and again, it's hard to explain the radio, like where I was when I was doing this radio job. It was nice, it was different, it was fine. But I kept looking, thinking, but I love TV. One thing my husband said to me that was so powerful to me, and it was part of our vows. My husband knew me from the sports world. We met in sport. We met when I was doing First Take. That was the first time we ever met over a satellite feed.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't meet in person till I had left, and certainly didn't start dating till later. But when he met me, I wasn't working. And he even said there was something missing. I had gotten so caught up in my career that I felt like that was all that I was. I was looking for the other side of me. He reminded me that it was okay, when I found that other side of me, I could still love my job and be about what I do, that it's okay to love what I do and have that be a part of who I am. And like, in knowing that and seeing where I've gotten to now, I wouldn't be on CBS News if I hadn't walked in that door and had that conversation. And nobody was going to push the way I was. And if I hadn't done the first story for CBS News, it wouldn't have led to more stories. There was some luck, without a doubt. Lori Orlando from ESPN came to CBS News. This is a woman who was in charge of our talent department at ESPN, and now was in charge at CBS. So people at CBS News who knew me from seeing me on ESPN and now starting to see me on CBS News suddenly had someone who had known my 10-year career at ESPN. And that helped in saying, she anchored a morning show. She did this. And it was the only nudge that a few people, that Chris Licht, who at the time was in charge of CBS This Morning, and Ryan Cadro, it was like the only nudge they needed. And they're like, oh, we should try her filling in. Filled in a little more. And now being on CBS This Morning Saturday, like, it sounds so easy. It wasn't. And it's literally one meeting away from never having this job, which, when I reflect back, this literally was my dream job when I got into the industry. So it is crazy to me that somehow I got here, but I also think without all the bad stuff, I would never have gotten here.
So I love you so much. This is making me, it's making me so happy just having this conversation with you. But so now you got your wonderful husband, Sean, who I've known for many years. Every time I called him to do something on ESPN, he always answered and always did it. So Sean, if you're listening, I love you. You have your Sean, you have your Jack, you have Barkley, you're splitting time between New York. You got an amazing job. What would 2021 Dana go back and say to Dana when she was at her lowest point? What would you say to her?
To be a little easier on myself, like that we all go through some of these times. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to not know how you're going to get yourself out of this. And probably more than anything, like it's okay to be sad about it. It's okay to be sad and angry and feel unhappy. Like that's part of how we get other places. By the way, all those wonderful things that you mentioned, which are, I'm so lucky and happy. I also am miserable sometimes right now. And I'm like mild depression out of not going to the Super Bowl, because that's something I always do. And that's part of who I am. And nothing is perfect. So maybe I'd go back to that myself at the lowest point and say that this is okay. It's okay to feel this way, because this will make you stronger. It will make you appreciate the happy parts, and there are other happy parts to come. If you push for them, you'll appreciate them more. Because I definitely think I appreciate the success that I'm having now more than I did when I was at ESPN. And that makes me a little sad. I wish I had appreciated it more at the time than I did.
Yeah, I think for our listeners out there who aren't super sports fans, Super Bowl week is sort of like the Mecca event for anyone that covers sports. And I am no longer with ESPN, and this week has hit me. It's weird for me not to be down there. And I think that, you know, in talking to you, like the ESPNW Summit is another huge event for me that I've booked for a decade. And if I'm being completely honest, which is what this podcast is all about, I can't process how I'm not going to be a part of that yet. I am not there yet. And it honestly is so heartbreaking for me. And so I don't know how to work through that at the moment.
You know what I think some of it is, and it's different for everything. Because obviously, from like, now I walk through news and sports like this line that I straddle, and I think sometimes you have to remember I'm thinking about for you, for the ESPNW Summit, like there'll be something that takes that place. There will be something else that you can find that will serve some of that purpose, or you'll find a way to get back to that. And that, you know, it sounds easier said than done. I have no idea how to tell you to do it. Or it's even just I keep trying to do the appreciating that I'm not traveling, so I'm with my family, or that next year at the Super Bowl, all the things, because by the way, what other people may not realize, we all want to go, but then we bitch the whole time we're there because it's chaotic and you can never get stuff done and guests are late. Right.
Could not be more true.
It's, again, I'm sure I bitched last year saying, I can't believe this. But there is this appreciation. Again, I go back to, I don't think I appreciated the success that I had at ESPN in a way I wish I had. I think missing events like this hopefully make you realize how to take them in differently. Not that you didn't appreciate it before, but there will be something else. I don't know. I feel like I'm not making sense, but hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. No, you are,
because you know, we had a puppy child like you did with Chewy. We had a dog that we lost last Christmas that we had for 14 years. We had her twice as long as we've had our kids. And
right.
You know, my middle daughter, which is so funny, she's only 4 and she misses our dog Bella the most. And I try and say to them whenever they get sad, you know, let's be really thankful that it happened instead of being sad that it's over. And I think that I need to just sit in that. I tell myself that often, especially with leaving my career at ESPN, is that instead of being, you know, whatever emotion that's negative, be really happy that I was able to experience it for as long as I did. And like, you know, we say this all the time, is you can have your 5 emotional minutes and then you get up and you be a gangster and then you just go back to it. Exactly.
Yeah. But I think if you don't have the 5 emotional minutes, I think if you pretend like it's all fine and it's, you don't appreciate it as much. I also think that drives you, because that, while it can be hard to get out of those feelings, that's what drives you to find the next career. How do I get that feeling my other job used to give me? Or where can I get that from something, from anything? So it is, I think as women, we so often push feelings away, and you always, I'm gonna be happy, I'm gonna be okay. Sometimes you have to feel the feels is my new thing. I'm sure somebody else said it first, but I keep saying that, like, you got to feel the feels, because if you don't, they're eventually going to come overtake you at some point. And sometimes it's not a convenient time to do it, but it will always, for me, it's always just made me better. I was at my worst when I didn't allow myself and didn't trust the people around me to tell them what was going on. I think that was another, I keep going back to this trust thing of having people around you. I had a time at First Take where I was going through just a bad time, and I needed to trust the people around me a little more and just tell them what was going on. Because instead I was just this raging bitch walking around all the time, and no one knew why, until finally back against the wall, I'm like, well, here's what it is. So trust the people around you to help you get through those times.
It's so true. It's so powerful and so important. Final question. What is your message of hope that you want other people to know?
That we're all stronger than we think we are. And that goes for the strongest person out there who thinks he or she, like, I do everything, I can survive everything. We all have something that brings us to our knees. But in the end, I have seen this in people, especially this year. I saw it in my mother the day my father died. I have seen it in people who have lost loved ones and haven't been able to say goodbye. I've seen it in people who are mourning careers, that because of this economy, we are all so much stronger than we think we are. And that's what we always have to remember, is that we can get through these things that feel like they are taking us to our knees and we're never going to get up from.
Dana, thank you so much for being vulnerable with us and for sharing your story of perseverance. We're just so grateful, and I love your story. I love you so much. If you have any further questions or comments for myself or Dana, please visit our website, neverloseyourcape.com, and send us the note in the contact us section. And as a reminder, to see the video version of this episode, you can visit neverloseyourcape.com. Dana, you're amazing. We love you.
Love you guys too. Thanks for having me.